If someone were to only become a fan of F1 this season, they would think that Lewis Hamilton was a midfield talent who's known for his antics off the track than his performance on the track. For the past 8 races, excluding Bahrain, Lewis has had a bumpy ride, both figuratively and literally, with the British driver only setting foot on a podium once. And that streak looked like it was going to continue, but things turned around on Sunday's race. So is the 7-time world champion back to his old form? Will this success continue at their home race at Silverstone? Well, let's talk about it then. But before we get going, consider subscribing if you thought that the battle between Max and Sainz to the end was nerve-wracking as well. Now let's get to it. Hamilton looked like he was heading into another rough weekend, with its worst looking at second practice where Lewis would finish 13th in the timesheet. Hamilton would be heard through the team radio saying that the car was undrivable and so bad. After the session, Lewis was visually frustrated in his interview, saying, "Nothing we do to this car generally seems to work. We are trying different setups. Me and George went with much different setups in this P2 just to see if one way works and one way doesn't. I'll wait to hear how it felt for him, but for me, it was a disaster. It's like the car is getting worse. It's getting more and more unhappy the more we do to it. We will keep working on it. It is what it is. I think this is the car for the year. We will have to tough it out and work hard on building a better car for next year." Lewis would also share in detail how hard the W13 was to keep out of the walls, saying, "One touch of the curb and the thing goes flying. It's so stiff," he added. "Here you need to be able to use the curbs, so it's very tricky. It's not the Montreal that I know, am used to, and have experienced through my career. It's the worst I've ever felt in a car here. I'm hoping overnight we can try and make some changes, but it's the fundamentals of the car. It is what it is, and it's going to be a struggle. It's a monumental fight the whole time to keep it out of the wall. When it bounces, the car leaves the ground a lot, and when it lands, it grips up and goes in different directions. You are just trying to catch a car that jumps, hops, and grips. It's tough. It just keeps you on edge, and there were some big hits today. We've raised the car and it doesn't make a difference. We have tried loads and loads of things and ticked them all off. Those ones don't work, so we have to go and find something else. We are way off. But it's to be expected with this car." Sky Sports F1 expert Martin Brundle would comment on this, saying that he believes that Mercedes are getting desperate in their search to improve their car. He also feels that the team is at a wit's end and are running out of ideas and have resorted to an experimental approach. In his words, "That was a very significant thing that Lewis said in terms of 'this is the car we've got,'" said Brundle. "It's looking more and more like they can't sort this 2022 Mercedes out. It's too much of a knife edge of a setup. They've got to basically bolt it down to the ground." Lewis is more or less admitting that they are going to have to make the best of this car. We don't see James Allison on site too often. If they can't find a solution, no one can with the resources they've got. And it seems like other teams are getting tired of hearing Hamilton's complaints, as AlphaTauri's boss, Franz Tost, told Lewis to stay at home. Tost claimed that drivers should watch races on TV if they thought that driving an F1 car was too difficult. In his words, "These are Formula One cars. This is not a Rolls-Royce, and drivers should be aware about this. If the cars are too stiff or it's too difficult for them, maybe they should stay at home in the living room, sitting in the chair, and then they can do the races in TV or where, I don't know." But come qualifying, Lewis would indeed keep to himself and qualify 4th for Sunday's race, his highest qualifying finish for the season. After the session, Lewis was visibly elated with the result, saying, "I can't tell you how happy I am. Me and Ange had the biggest hug at the back of the garage because we've both been working so hard, and then obviously this past week was a real challenge. And I'm so grateful to have her with me every day, to just work through the pain and get my body right, and then to come here with a car still we're struggling. We know on pure pace in the dry we're still a long way off, but to get top 5 in qualifying in these conditions is awesome. I think it's my highest qualifying this year. It feels very, very similar to getting my first qualifying in Australia in 2007 in terms of the excitement." Lewis would carry his momentum into Sunday's race, and for once, this time have luck on his side when it came to timing with the safety cars in the race, which gave him the upper hand over George throughout the race, who to his credit would finish right behind Lewis at P4, keeping his streak of being the only driver this season to finish in the top 5 in all races. Lewis, on the other hand, would finally have a podium finish and was obviously ecstatic in his post-race interview, saying, "It feels great to be amongst the battle. For a second, I was kind of keeping up with these guys. It's given me and the team a lot of hope that there's more to come from this car. The potential is there. When you get a full race distance, you find out a lot with the car. A lot to take from today. Got really good reliability. Great work from the team. Just got to keep our heads down. I know where I'm losing to these guys, so that's where I'm going to focus on attacking to improve. It was honestly one of the best feelings of the year to be back, especially in Montreal, where I got my first win 15 years ago," he added. And to be back up there, to feel the atmosphere and the crowd was pretty special. Toto would also be elated by Lewis's result, saying that Lady Luck has finally come and visited Lewis, saying, "There were a lot of races that worked against him where he could have scored a podium or a much better result. It was not his wrongdoing, but bad luck. And seeing him now on the positive side and being on the podium without anything being gifted, that is good to see." But even with a fine result, Toto and the team admit that they are far off where they want to be, and admitting that they are far off from competing for the title, so Toto believes that their best course of action through the rest of the year is to figure out what does and what doesn't work to ensure that next year's W14 will be more competitive than its predecessor. In his words, "I think you can only start to look at the W14 when you have actually understood what you need to change on the W13. The car's not in a great place, to say the least. I think we just need to see the remaining races session by session and test by test. And unfortunately, we don't have enough days to sort it out. We're lacking pace, independent of a bouncing car. And realistically, we're not going to win the championship by a massive margin. So maybe consolidating third is what we need to do at that stage and see what we learn." George Russell would agree with what Toto had to say, with him saying, "Our pace was certainly closer to Ferrari and Red Bull than we have seen all season. The inherent pace isn't there. The pace was really strong in the first stint and second stint, but the final stint after the restart, I just couldn't get the tyres working. It was bumpy out there. The revisions that the FIA brought this weekend with the extra floor stay did nothing, hence why we didn't race it. The angle of it didn't allow to hold the floor up. This global issue of the car is far from over." But even with a bumpy setup and a pace incomparable to what Red Bull and Ferrari have, Mercedes has been the model of consistency this season, with either George or Lewis still to experience a DNF. This race saw Red Bull's Sergio Perez retire from the race from what looks like another engine failure. And as we know, Ferrari still have to prove themselves as well on the reliability front. But what do you think? Will Mercedes be steadily sailing to being competitive again? Or was this just a fluke from the Silver Arrows? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.